The railroad is coming to Redbone Creek, and with it comes Cyrus Vance, a man who sees land, water, and people as things to be bought, broken, or buried. Standing in his way are a haunted marshal, a fearless widow, and a young deputy with a debt that could destroy them all. What begins as a fight over one dusty piece of land soon becomes a battle for the soul of an entire valley. In this story, the real weapon is not a revolver. It is knowledge, courage, truth, and the willingness to stand together when greed comes riding in.
The sun hadn't found Redbone Creek yet, but I had. I was sitting at a desk that smelled like old pine and bad decisions. 5 o'clock in the morning. The air was cold enough to crack a man's pride. I looked at the paper in my hand. It was a deed, dirt cheap land and high-stakes blood. My brother, James, had died believing this dirt was his. I believed it, too. 8 years, I carried that belief like a stone in my pocket. Vengeance is a hungry thing. It eats the man who feeds it before it ever touches the enemy. That is the first lesson of justice. Most men with a badge never learn it. They think the law is a hammer. They forget that if you only use a hammer, the whole world starts looking like a nail. I folded the paper, put it in my breast pocket, right over my heart. The door creaked. Jesse walked in. He was 19. He had a face that hadn't seen enough trouble to be wary. He was my deputy. He was also the best kid I knew. "Tao sang denzo, Marshal," Jesse said. He was leaning against the doorframe. "The widow. She says at the boarding house. People are talking." "They always talk," I said. My voice sounded like gravel under a wagon wheel. "What are they saying?" "They say she is young. They say she looks like she is waiting for a fight." Jesse looked at his boots. "Marshal, I have a sister back east. Sometimes I worry about her. A woman alone in a place she don't know, it ain't right. Every human being has the right to be treated with dignity, regardless of where they come from or what their name is. That is what I believe. I hope we treat this lady fair." I stood up. My spurs gave a little jingle, a lonely sound. "I'll treat her by the law, Jesse. That's as fair as a man gets." I walked out. The town was waking up. Dust, the smell of wood smoke. People saw me, and they moved. They called me the scary cowboy. I didn't mind. Fear is just a shortcut to obedience. It is easier than earning respect. I reached the boarding house. Clara Sterling was standing on the porch. She didn't look like a city widow. She didn't look like a victim. She had brown hair tied back tight. Her eyes were the color of the sky right before a blizzard, gray and heavy. "Marshal Thorne," she said. She didn't wait for me to speak. She knew my name. "I imagine you were here about the land." "It's my land, Mrs. Sterling. By rights, by blood." She didn't flinch. She stepped closer. She smelled like lavender and old paper. "Blood is a messy way to claim a title," she said. Her voice was steady, like a heartbeat. "I was a court clerk in Philadelphia for 6 years. I've read the Land Acts of 1875. I've read your brother's filings. There is a gap in your logic, Marshal, and a hole in your heart." I felt my jaw tighten. I wasn't used to women talking about logic, or my heart. "The law says I started." "The law says what we make it say," she interrupted. "But real power doesn't come from a gun or a badge. It comes from knowledge. A person who understands the rules can never truly be a slave to another man's whim. That is the value of an education. It is the only shield that actually works." She looked me right in the eye. Most men looked at my scar or my gun. She looked at me. "I'm not leaving, Elias Thorne," she said. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I realized then that this wasn't going to be a walk in the park. It was going to be a war. Knowledge is a right, not a privilege. When you keep a person in the dark, you steal their soul. This woman was standing in the light, and it was blinding. "We'll see what the judge says," I muttered. I turned and walked away. "Nahart, Not from anger, from something else. I had come to take her land. But as I walked back to my office, I had a strange feeling. I had a feeling that before this was over, she was going to be the one taking something from me. And for the first time in 8 years, I wasn't sure if I wanted to stop her. The sun was a dull copper coin hanging over the rim of the desert. It didn't bring warmth, just a dry, stinging light that made you squint until your head ached. I sat on the porch of the jailhouse, watching the dust dance in the street. Jesse was inside, cleaning his sidearm. The rhythmic click-clack of the cylinder was the only thing breaking the silence. I kept thinking about Clara Sterling, about the way she stood her ground. Most people in territory look at the ground when they talk to a man wearing a tin star. She looked at me like I was just another problem she had to solve. The first thing a man has to learn about power is that it doesn't belong to him. It's just a loan from the people he serves. When you start thinking the power is yours, you've already lost your way. That is the danger of the badge. It makes you feel tall when you really just standing on the shoulders of the law. I said that out loud, just to hear the words. Jesse stopped his cleaning. "You say something, Marshal," he asked, peeking through the screen door. "Just thinking, Jesse. Just thinking about what we redoing here." He stepped out, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. "You worried about that woman? I can see it. You got that look you get when a horse is about to bolt." "She's a lawyer," daughter. "Or a clerk or something," I said. "She knows things. And knowledge in the wrong hands is like a loaded gun in a dark room. You don't know where it's pointed until it goes off." Before Jesse could answer, a buckboard wagon pulled up. It was fancy. Polished wood, clean harnesses. Not the kind of rig you saw often in Redbone Creek. The man driving it was wearing a suit that cost more than my horse. Cyrus Vance. He was the man the railroad sent to do their dirty work. He didn't carry a gun. He carried a briefcase. Greed is a disease that doesn't kill the one who has it. It kills everyone around them. A man who wants everything will eventually leave his neighbors with nothing. That is why we have laws not to help the rich get richer, but to make sure the poor don't get trampled into the dirt. Vance climbed down. He had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Marshal Thorne," he said, tipped his hat. "A fine morning for progress, wouldn't you say?" "Depends on who is progressing," I told him. I didn't get up. Vance leaned against the railing. "I hear the widow is in town, Clara Sterling. I imagine you already had a talk with her about that land." "We talked," I said. Vance chuckled. It sounded like dry leaves scraping on a grave. "She's staying until she sees the color of my money. No one stays in this wasteland for the scenery. Marshal, everyone has a price, especially a woman left with nothing but a patch of rocks and a dead husband's debts." I looked at him. I felt a coldness in my chest that had nothing to do with the morning air. "You think everyone is for sale, Vance?" "I know they are," he said. "It's the American way. Property rights are a pillar of freedom, but when poverty forces a person to sell their soul, the law becomes an instrument of oppression rather than protection. I'm just here to offer her an out, a way to walk away with her pockets full instead of her boots full of dust." "She isn't interested," I said. "We'll see," Vance replied. He turned and headed toward the boarding house. I watched him go. I felt a knot tightening in my gut. I looked at Jesse. He was watching Vance, too. His face was pale. Too pale. "Jess," I said, "go down to the telegraph office. See if any wires came in from Santa Fe." He nodded and hurried off. He was moving too fast, like he was running away from something. I stood up. My knees popped. I headed toward the center of town. I saw Clara through the window of the mercantile. She was buying flour, sugar, salt, the basics. But she wasn't looking at the goods. She was looking at a ledger. I walked inside. The bell over the door chimed. She didn't look up. "You read checking the prices, Mrs. Sterling?" I asked. "I'm checking the math, Marshal," she said. She looked up then. Her eyes were tired. "The storekeeper is overcharging for the weight. A 3% markup on the scales. It's a common trick. Equality isn't just a word we say on the 4th of July. It's the right to be treated fairly in the marketplace and in the courtroom. When a man cheats his neighbor out of a few pennies, he's stealing more than money. He's stealing the trust that holds a community together. That is why I am here, to keep people honest." "He's a businessman," I said, though I didn't like the storekeeper much. "He's a thief with a license," she corrected. She closed the ledger. "Cyrus Vance came to see me. I saw. He offered me $3,000 for the deed," she said. My heart skipped. 3,000 was a fortune. It was more than the land was worth by half. "That's a lot of money." "It's blood money," she said. "He wants to run the tracks right through the spring. If he does that, the ranchers downstream will lose their water. The whole valley will die so a few men in New York can get their dividends a day earlier." She stepped closer to me. The smell of lavender was gone. Now she just smelled like sweat and determination. "I know why you want the land, Elias. You want it for your brother, for a ghost. But I want it because if I sell it, I am killing this town. Every person has a responsibility to the future. We are just caretakers of this earth. If we destroy it for a quick profit, we are failing the generations that haven't been born yet. That is the lesson my father taught me, and it's the one I intend to live by." I looked at her. I saw the fire in her. It was the same fire I used to have before I started believing that the law was just a set of rules written in a dusty book. "So you won't sell?" I asked. "I can't sell," she said. Her voice dropped. "But I have to. My brother, Jesse. He's us in trouble, Elias." The world seemed to stop spinning. I felt the air leave my lungs. "Jess? What are you talking about?" "He's my brother," she whispered. "Our mother was a Sterling. He took our Father S. name when he came west. He didn't want anyone to know we were related. He wanted to make it on his own." I leaned against the counter. My head was spinning. Jesse, my deputy, the kid I'd treated like a son for 6 months. He was her brother. "He owes money," she continued. "Bad men in Santa Fe. They recoming for him. I came here to sell the land and pay them off. That was the plan. Family is a bond that can save you or sink you. But when you lie to the people who trust you, you break a different kind of bond. A bond of brotherhood. A man who hides the truth from his friends is a man who is afraid to be seen for who he really is. That is a heavy burden to carry." I thought about Jesse S. pale face. I thought about the way he wouldn't look me in the eye. "Why didn't he tell me?" I asked. My voice was a whisper. "He was ashamed," Clara said. "He admires you. He didn't want you to know he was a failure." I walked out of the mercantile without another word. I needed air. I needed to think. The town of Redbone Creek felt different now. The dust seemed thicker. The shadows seemed longer. I saw Vance standing across the street, lighting a cigar. He looked like a man who was winning. I went back to the office. Jesse was there. He was sitting at his desk, staring at the wall. "Jesse," I said. He jumped. "Yeah, Marshal? You got a sister?" He froze. He didn't move a muscle. Then, slowly, he nodded. "She's a good woman, Jesse," I said. "She is trying to save your skin." He put his head in his hands. "I'm sorry, Elias. I didn't know how to tell you. Mistakes are human, but running from them is a choice. A man is defined by how he faces the things he has done wrong, not by the mistakes themselves. If you want to be a man worth his salt, you have to stand up and own your life. That is the only way to find peace. I sat down across from him. I felt old, older than my 41 years. Vance is going to get that land, I said. If she sells to save you, the railroad wins. If she don't, you re a dead man. Either way, the town loses. I know, Jessie sobbed. I looked at the badge on my chest. It felt heavy, like a mountain. I thought about the law. I thought about the Bay-Fapli, the legal trap. There was a way, a desperate way. A way that would shock the town and probably ruin my reputation forever. But it would stop Vance. It would save Jessie. And it would keep the land in the hands of someone who actually cared about it. I stood up. My spurs jingled. Stay here, Jessie, I said. I'm going to see the judge. What are you going to do? He asked. I looked at him. I looked at the boy I'd tried to teach. I'm going to do something I never thought I'd do, I said. I'm going to use the law to fix a problem the law created. Sometimes you have to bend the rules to save the spirit of the law. That is the hardest lesson of all, knowing when to follow the book and when to follow your heart. And right now, my heart is telling me that we can't let the bad guys win. I walked out into the heat. I headed for the courthouse. My boots hit the dirt with a heavy, rhythmic thud. 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 The town didn't know what was coming. Neither did Clara. But I knew I was about to change everything. And I knew that once I did, there was no going back. Freedom is the right to choose your own path. But sometimes the path chooses you. And when it does, you have to have the courage to walk it, no matter how much it hurts. That is the true meaning of being a man. I climbed the steps of the courthouse. The wood groaned under my weight. I opened the door and stepped into the cool, dark hallway. The smell of old paper and wax met me. It smelled like the end of one life and the beginning of another. I knocked on Judge Miller's door. Come in, the voice called. I walked in. I took off my hat. Judge, I said, I need a marriage license, and I need it now. The judge looked up. He looked at me for a long time. For who, Elias? For me, I said, and for Clara Sterling. The room was silent. Outside, I could hear the wind start to pick up. A storm was coming, a storm of our own making. And I knew that when the dust settled, Redbone Creek would never be the same again. The clock on Judge Miller's wall didn't tick. It hammered. Each second was a nail being driven into the coffin of the life I used to know. I stood there, hat in hand, sweat cooling on my neck. The judge looked at me over his spectacles. He looked like a man who had seen everything and believed none of it. Elias, he said. His voice was deep, like water at the bottom of a well. You re-asking me to perform a miracle or a crime. I can tell which yet. I looked him straight in the eye. Judge, the law is supposed to be a fence that keeps the wolves out, not a cage that keeps the sheep trapped. That is the true purpose of a legal system, to provide a structure where the small can survive against the great. If the law can do that, it's just a set of rules for a game that has already been rigged. He leaned back. His chair groaned. The Widow' Protection Act of 1876. It is a dusty piece of paper, Elias. It says, a woman in possession of disputed land can appoint a male co-guardian through marriage to prevent a third-party seizure. It was written for ranch widows who were being bullied by land jumpers. It wasn't written for marshals who want to play hero. Vance is a wolf, Judge, I said, and he's got the railroad behind him. If he takes that land, Jessie dies and the town follows. I'm not playing hero. I'm playing the only hand I've got left. Miller sighed. He reached for a pen. It'll work on paper. But the town will talk. They say you used your badge to steal a wife and a deed. Your reputation will be gone by sundown. A man's reputation is what people say about him at his funeral. His character is what he does when no one is looking. I'd rather be a man with a bad name and a clean conscience than a hero with a hollow soul. That is a lesson. Every man in a position of power needs to learn your title. Doesn't define you. Your choices do. He nodded slowly. He started writing. The scratching of the nib sounded like a serrated knife on bone. He handed me the papers. They felt heavy, heavier than my colt. I walked out of the courthouse. The sun was high now, brutal. I headed for the boarding house. My heart was a drum. Thump, thump, thump. I found Clara on the porch again. She was sewing a button on a shirt. Her hands were steady. Mine were not. I didn't lead with small talk. I don't have the knack for it. I sat on the step below her. Vance is moving fast, I said. He is going to file for an injunction by noon tomorrow. If he does, he owns the spring, and he owns Jessie S. debt. She stopped sewing. She looked out at the dust. And what do you propose, Elias? You re a man of the law. Can the law stop him? The law is a tool, I said. And right now, Vance has the better grip on it, unless we change the handle. I took the papers out of my pocket. I didn't hand them to her yet. Equity is the soul of justice. It is the idea that the rules have to be applied with a sense of what is right, not just what is literal. If the letter of the law is killing the spirit of the people, then the law has failed. I am here to offer you a way to use the rules to save the spirit. I explained the act to her. I explained the marriage. I watched her face. I expected anger. I expected her to laugh in my face. But she just got very still. A marriage, she whispered, to you, the man who tried to evict me yesterday. It's a contract, Clara, I said. Nothing more. I'll sign a separate deed of trust. The land stays yours. After the railroad gives up, after Jessie is clear, we annul it. You go back east. I go back to my office. We both keep our lives. She stood up. She walked to the railing. She looked small against the vastness of the New Mexico sky. Consent is the foundation of every moral act. A person who is forced into a choice is not a participant. They are a victim. If I do this, Elias, it has to be because I choose it, not because you've cornered me. I need to know that you respect my right to say no, even if it means we both lose. You have the right to say no, I said. I meant it. I won't stop you. I'll walk away right now, but I can't save Jessie alone, and you can't save the land alone. She turned back to me. Her gray eyes were hard. Why would you do this? Why would you tie your name to mine? You don't even like me. I don't have to like you to respect you, I said. And I don't have to love you to do what is right. Integrity is doing the right thing because it is right, not because it's easy or because it feels good. My brother James was a fool, but he was a man of his word. I am trying to be the same. I'm trying to honor the truth, even if the truth is messy. She took the papers from me. She read every word, twice. She was a court clerk, all right. She saw the holes. She saw the risks. I have conditions, she said. Name them. You don't touch me, she said. Her voice didn't tremble. You sleep in the parlor. You treat me as a partner, not a ward. And you tell Jessie the truth. You tell him we did this for him. Transparency is the only cure for shame. If we hide the truth, we grow the rot. I will tell Jessie exactly what we are doing and why. A man who lives in the shadows of his own secrets will never find the light of his own strength. That is something Jessie needs to understand if he's ever going to grow up. Then I agree, she said. We went back to Judge Miller. It was 3 o'clock. The air in the office was stifling. There were no flowers, no music, just the smell of ink and the sound of a dry wind rattling the window pane. Miller stood behind his desk. He looked tired. Do you, Elias Thorne, take this woman? I do, I said. It felt like a confession. "Do you, Clara Sterling, take this man?" "I do," she said. It sounded like a battle cry. Miller pronounced us man and wife. He didn't tell me to kiss the bride. He knew better. He handed us the certificate. It was white and crisp. It felt like a bandage on a wound that hadn't stopped bleeding. Sacrifice is the price of change. You can build something new without giving up something old. Today, we gave up our names and our independence to build a wall around this town. It's a heavy price, but the things worth having usually are. That is the nature of a true commitment. It costs you something. We walked out onto the street. The town was there. News travels fast in a place with only one road. They were standing on the boardwalks. They were peering out from the saloon. Cyrus Vance was there too. He was standing by his buckboard, a cigar halfway to his mouth. He looked at us. He looked at the certificate in my hand. He didn't smile this time. I walked Clara to the boarding house to get her things. I carried her trunk. It was heavy, full of books and memories. We walked back to the small house on the disputed land, my brother S. house, our house. I opened the door. The air inside was stale. Dust motes danced in the late afternoon light. I set the trunk down. "The parlor is through there," Clara said. She didn't look at me. She looked at the walls. "I'll get the stove going," I said. I went out to the woodpile. I chopped wood with a ferocity that surprised me. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Every swing was a release. Every splinter was a doubt flying away. Jesse came riding up an hour later. He saw my horse. He saw Clara through the window. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Marshall?" he asked. He stayed in the saddle. "What's going on? Why is she here?" I stepped off the porch. I looked at the boy. I looked at my deputy. Honesty is a debt we owe to the people we care about. If you can be truthful with a man, you can trust him with your life. Jessie, Clara is my wife now. We married today to save this land from Vance and to save you from your debts. Jessie's face went from white to red. "You married her? Because of me?" "Because of the land," I lied. "Just a little bit, but mostly because it was the only way to keep the railroad from swallowing Redbone Creek whole. A man's life is tied to his community. If the community dies, the man is just a hollow shell. We did this to protect the future of this valley. And that future includes you, whether you like it or not." Jesse looked at the house. He looked at me. He didn't say a word. He just turned his horse and rode away. He rode hard. The dust he kicked up hung in the air like a question. I went back inside. Clara had started a fire in the stove. She was boiling water. She looked up at me. "He took it hard," she said. "He's young," I replied. "He thinks the world is simple. He hasn't learned yet that most of life is lived in the gray. Wisdom is the ability to see the complexity of a situation and still make a firm decision. It's not about having all the answers. It's about having the courage to act when the answers are hidden. Jesse will learn that. Or, he'd break. We ate a quiet meal. Salt, pork, and beans. We didn't talk about the future. We didn't talk about the town. We just ate. As the sun went down, the sky turned a deep, bruised purple. I took a blanket and a pillow to the parlor. I laid down on the hard sofa. The wood was stiff. The air was cold. But for the first time in 8 years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to happen. I felt like I was finally part of the story. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of purpose. When a man knows why he is fighting, the struggle becomes bearable. Tonight, I am a man with a heavy burden, but I am also a man with a direction. And that is more than most men ever find. I closed my eyes. In the room next to me, I could hear Clara moving around. The light through the floorboards was a thin, golden line. It was a boundary, and it was a promise. Red Bone Creek was sleeping. Cyrus Vance was probably planning his next move. Jesse was out there somewhere, nursing his pride. But here, in this house built on a lie, something true was starting to grow. The truth is like a seed. It doesn't matter how much dirt you pile on top of it. Eventually, it is going to find the light. And when it does, it is going to change everything it touches. That is the hope we have to hold on to, that the truth is stronger than the lie. I drifted off to the sound of the wind. It wasn't hammering anymore. It was just blowing, steady and cold, carrying us into a tomorrow that no one had predicted. The sun didn't ask for permission to rise over Redbone Creek. It just did. It spilled over the jagged edges of the mountains like spilled honey, thick and gold. But inside the house James built, the light felt cold. I woke up on that parlor sofa with a kink in my neck and a weight in my chest that felt like a bucket of lead. I could hear the stove rattling in the kitchen. The smell of coffee was already drifting through the door. It wasn't the weak, burnt stuff I usually made. It smelled rich, like Philadelphia, like a world where people had time to sit and talk instead of just surviving. I stood up. My joints made a sound like dry twigs snapping. I adjusted my badge. I looked at the parlor. Clara had already tidied it. My boots were lined up. My hat was on the peg. It felt strange. A man gets used to his own mess. He starts to think the mess is part of who he is. Domesticity is a quiet kind of power. We think the big decisions are made in courthouses or on horseback with a gun in hand. But the real structure of a life is built in the morning. It's built in the way a house is kept and the way a meal is shared. When you invite someone into your space, you are giving them the keys to your routine. And routine is the only thing that keeps a man from drifting into the wild. I walked into the kitchen. Clara was standing at the window. She was wearing a plain calico dress. Her hair was braided tight. She looked like she'd been awake for hours. She didn't turn around when I entered. "Coffee is on the table," she said. "Thank you," I replied. I sat down. The mug was hot. It felt good against my palms. "You didn't have to get up so early. I have work to do, Elias," she said. She turned then. She held a stack of papers. "If we are going to beat Cyrus Vance, we can't just rely on a marriage certificate. We need a strategy. We need to look at the tax liens on the surrounding properties. Vance isn't just after your spring. He is building a corridor. He is going to squeeze the neighbors until they pop." I looked at the papers. They were covered in her neat, precise handwriting. Intelligence is the most underrated weapon in the West. People focus on the caliber of a bullet, but the caliber of a mind is what wins a war. A person who can see the chessboard while everyone else is playing checkers is the one who survives. That is why I value her, not because she is my wife, but because she is a thinker. And a thinker is a dangerous thing to overlook. "I'll check the records at the office," I said. "But Jesse, he has the problem right now. He's out there somewhere feeling like we betrayed him." "We didn't betray him," Clara said firmly. She sat across from me. "We gave him a chance he didn't earn. Grace is a difficult concept for a young man to swallow. He wants to earn his way. He wants to be the hero. But sometimes being a man means accepting help when you read drowning. It's a lesson in humility, and humility is the foundation of true strength. Jesse hasn't learned that yet. He thinks pride is a shield, but it's actually a target." I finished my coffee. It was good, too good. It made me want to stay in the chair. But a marshal doesn't get to stay in the chair, especially not one who just shocked the town into a stunned silence. I walked out to the barn. The air was crisp. I saddled my horse, a big bay with a temper like a hangover. As I was tightening the cinch, I heard a horse coming up the trail. It wasn't Jesse. It was a buckboard. Cyrus Vance was sitting on the bench. He was alone this time. He stopped the wagon 10 feet from the barn door. He didn't get down. He just sat there, looking at me with those cold, calculating eyes. "Congratulations, Marshal," he said. His voice was like silk on a razor. "I didn't think you had it in you. A marriage of convenience, a legal maneuver. It's clever, almost poetic." "It's legal, Vance," I said. "I didn't look up from the cinch. That S all you need to know." "Oh, I know it's legal," Vance said. He leaned forward. "But is it sustainable? You've tied yourself to a woman who doesn't know this land. You've alienated your deputy. And you've made a lot of people in this town wonder if their marshal is working for the law or for himself. A leader's greatest asset is the trust of his people. Once that trust is fractured, the authority vanishes. You may have the land today, Elias, but you've lost the moral high ground. And in the long run, the high ground is the only place worth standing." I looked up then. I felt the heat rising in my neck. "I am standing where I need to stand to protect this valley. You're here for a profit. I am here for a future. There's a difference. The difference is $3,000 and a railroad that's coming. Whether you like it or not," Vance said. He snapped the reins. "Enjoy your honeymoon, Marshal. I'll see you at the hearing." He drove away. I watched the dust settle. He was right about one thing the town was watching. I rode into Redbone Creek. Usually I get a few nods. A morning marshal. Today it was different. Men stopped talking when I passed. Women pulled their children a little closer. I was a scary cowboy before, but now I was something else. I was a man who had gamed the system. Public opinion is a fickle beast. It cheer for you when you re-winning and tear you apart when you re-struggling. But a man who lives his life based on the whispers of the crowd is a man who has no anchor. You have to do what is right because it is right, not because it is popular. That is the essence of individual integrity, standing firm when the world wants you to bend. I went to the office. Jesse wasn't there. His desk was clean. His spare hat was gone. I sat down and pulled the ledger out. I started looking at the names Clara had mentioned. Mid-morning, the door opened. It was Jesse. He looked like he hadn't slept. His clothes were dusty. He looked at me, then at his desk. "You relate," I said. I kept my voice flat. "I am here to quit," Jesse said. He reached for his badge. "Sit down, Jesse," I said. "I am not sitting. I'm done. You and Clara, you treated me like a child. You made a mockery of everything I thought we stood for." Stood up. I walked around the desk. I was taller than him, but right now, he felt like he was 10 feet tall with righteous anger. Loyalty is not a gift you give to someone just because they share your name or your history. It is a debt you pay to the people who prove they are worth it. I didn't marry your sister to hurt you. I married her to give you a life that isn't lived in a shallow grave. If you can't see that, it's not because I've failed as a marshal. It's because you failed as a brother. Jesse flinched. The anger in his eyes flickered. She shouldn't have had to do it. She chose to do it, I said, because she loves you, and because she sees what's coming. Vance doesn't care about your debts, Jesse. He wants the land. He's using your mistakes to get it. Every person is responsible for the consequences of their actions. You made a mess in Santa Fe. Clara is helping you clean it up. Instead of throwing a tantrum, you should be trying to be the kind of man who deserves that kind of sacrifice. That is what being an adult means, owning your failures and respecting those who help you fix them. Jesse looked at the badge in his hand. He didn't put it on the desk. He just gripped it until his knuckles were white. Vance was here this morning, I said. He thinks we're weak. He thinks the town is going to turn on us. He's right about the town. They scared, and scared people do stupid things. Jesse looked up. What do you want me to do? I want you to be my deputy, I said. Not because I am your brother-in-law, but because I need a man I can trust. Put the badge back on. Go down to the creek and check the markers on the north boundary. Vance's men have been moving them in the night. Document it. Bring me the facts. Jesse stood there for a long minute. The silence in the office was heavy. I could hear the clock ticking. Talk, talk, talk. Finally, he pinned the badge back on his vest. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say thank you. He just nodded and walked out. I watched him go. I felt a small relief, but it was overshadowed by the work ahead. I spent the rest of the day in the records room. It was hot. It smelled like mothballs and decay. But Clara was right. Vance had been buying up small, worthless parcels surrounding the spring. He wasn't just building a railroad. He was building a dam. If he got the Sterling land, he could cut off the water to every ranch in the valley. He'd be a king, and kings don't care about the law. Power without accountability is the definition of tyranny. It doesn't matter if it is a crown or a corporation. When one man holds the lifeblood of a community in his hands, freedom dies. That is why we fight. Not for a patch of dirt, but for the principle that no one man should have the power to destroy another man's livelihood. That is a human right worth defending. I rode home as the shadows were stretching across the valley. The house was quiet. Clara was on the porch, reading a book by the fading light. She looked up as I approached. Jesse came back, I said as I dismounted. I know, she said. He stopped by here on his way to the creek. He didn't say much, but he looked different. He's starting to see the weight of things, I said. I sat on the edge of the porch. Vance came by today, she said. Her voice was calm, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. He didn't come to the house. He just sat at the gate for 20 minutes, just watching. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. Intimidation is the weapon of the coward. It's designed to make you doubt your own resolve before the battle even begins. When a man stops talking and starts watching, yes, trying to find your breaking point. But what he doesn't realize is that some people don't have a breaking point. They only have a sharpening point. He won't find it here, I said. Clara looked at me. The gray in her eyes was like flint. I hope not, Elias, because Ivy spent my whole life being moved around by men with big plans. I am tired of moving. You aren't moving, I said. We sat in silence for a while. The stars were starting to poke through the purple sky. It was a beautiful country. It was a hard country. It demanded everything and promised nothing. I found the records, I said. You were right. Yes, trying to dam the creek. Clara nodded. Then we take it to the regional court. We skip Judge Miller. We go to Santa Fe. We file for a public interest stay. It's a long shot, but it is the only way to stop the railroad's eminent domain claim. It'll take money, I said, and time. I have some savings, Clara said, and we have time, as long as we stand together. Unity is the only defense against a superior force. A single stick is easy to break, but a bundle is nearly impossible. That is the lesson of a community. We are only as strong as the bonds we build with one another. If Vance can't drive a wedge between us, he can't win. That is the truth of any partnership, whether it's a marriage or a town. I looked at the small light in the kitchen window. I thought about the parlor sofa. I thought about the certificate in the Judge S drawer. It was a forced marriage. It was a strange partnership. But as I sat there in the cooling air, I realized something. I wasn't just protecting James's land anymore. I wasn't just saving Jessie. I was protecting the woman sitting next to me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care if the town was shocked. I didn't care if my reputation was in the dust. I had a purpose, and a purpose is a powerful thing. The value of a human life is measured by what a person is willing to protect. If you only care about yourself, your life is small. But if you care about the truth and about the people around you, your life becomes something significant. Tonight, I am a man with a heavy burden, but I am also a man who knows exactly why he is carrying it. And that makes all the difference. I stood up and offered Clara my hand. She took it. Her grip was firm. We walked into the house together. The door closed with a solid, rhythmic click. Outside, the coyotes started to howl. The wind picked up. The storm was still coming. But the house was ready. We were ready. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's just the decision that something else is more important than fear. We are afraid of Vance. We are afraid of the future. But we are more afraid of losing our dignity. And that is why we will stand. That is the final lesson of the day. Some things are worth the fight. The morning light in New Mexico doesn't creep. It strikes. It hits the dust on the floorboards and turns it into a million little stars dancing in the air. I stood at the edge of the kitchen, watching Clara. She had turned my brother's dining table into a battlefield of paper, ledgers, maps, ink bottles. She looked at those documents the way a tracker looks at a broken branch in the brush. She was looking for a path through the woods. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched her. She was a city woman, but she had a grit that most men in Redbone Creek couldn't find with a map and a lantern. She looked up and caught my eye. She didn't smile. Clara Sterling wasn't a woman for easy smiles. "You re-staring, Elias," she said. Her pen didn't stop moving. "I'm observing," I corrected. I walked over and pulled out a chair. It scraped against the wood. A loud, rhythmic sound. "Scritch, you've been at this since 3 in the morning." "Sleep is a luxury for people who aren't being hunted," she said. She laid her pen down. She looked at me. "I've been reading your brother's original claim, Elias, the one from 1870. And I've been reading the Thorne family records I pulled from the Philadelphia archives before I left the East. I felt a coldness in my gut. Philadelphia? Why would you be looking at my family in Philadelphia?" Preparation is the only real defense against the unknown. A person who enters a fight without knowing their opponent. As history is a person who has already lost. That is the first lesson of a free life information, is the currency of power. If you don't have the facts, someone else will use your ignorance to build a cage around you. I needed to know who I was dealing with. I leaned back. I wasn't used to being researched. I was the one who did the investigating. I wore the badge. I held the keys. But here she was, peeling back the layers of my life like she was skinning an onion. "What did you find?" I asked. My voice was low. "I found out that your brother James was a liar," she said. She didn't say it meanly. She said it like she was reading the weather. "He didn't lose this land to a land jumper, Elias. He didn't lose it to a crooked banker. He sold the mineral rights in 1872 to a shell company in Pennsylvania. He took the money and he spent it." "The dispute you've been fighting?" "For 8 years it's as a ghost. James sold the very ground you were standing on before he ever died. The air left my lungs. I felt like I'd been bucked off a horse and landed on a rock. 8 years. I had spent 8 years carrying a grudge. I had spent 8 years treating the town like enemies. I had built my whole life on the idea that James was a victim. The truth is a heavy burden, but it is the only thing that can actually set a man free. We spend our lives building monuments to the people we love, but sometimes those monuments are built on lies. When you discover the foundation is rotten, you have a choice. You can keep pretending and let the building crush you, or you can tear it down and start over on solid ground. That is what maturity looks like, facing the ugly truth, so you can stop living a beautiful lie. He told me he was cheated, I whispered. Maybe he felt cheated, Clara said. She reached across the table and touched the back of my hand. Her fingers were cool. But the law doesn't care about feelings. The law cares about signatures. James signed his name. He traded his future for a fast dollar, and you've been paying the interest on that debt ever since. I looked at the badge on my chest. It felt like it was made of lead. I had used this badge to bully people into respecting a memory that wasn't real. I felt a deep, biting shame. So Vance knows, I said. Vance knows exactly what I know, Clara replied. He's been waiting for you to realize it. He wanted you to feel foolish, because a foolish man is an angry man, and an angry man makes mistakes. Control of one's emotions is the hallmark of a civilized mind. If an enemy can make you lose your temper, they've already bypassed your defenses. Anger is a smokescreen that hides the exit. You have to be calm to see the way out. I stood up. I needed to move. I went to the door and looked out at the valley. The sagebrush was gray-green. The mountains were purple. It was a beautiful place. But today, it felt like a trap. Why tell me now? I asked. Because we are partners, she said. She came up behind me. She didn't touch me, but I could feel her presence. And because Vance is coming to the house today, he's bringing the sheriff from the next county. He's going to try to shame you in front of the town. He wants to show everyone that the scary cowboy is just a man chasing shadows. I turned around. I looked at her. What do? We change the conversation, Clara said. We don't fight over the past. We fight over the future. We file a countersuit based on the 1877 Water Rights Amendment. It doesn't matter who owns the dirt if they don't own the water. And James didn't sell the water. He couldn't. By law, the water belongs to the land, and the land is currently under a marital stay. Equality under the law is the only shield the common person has against the powerful. It doesn't matter how much money Cyrus Vance has. He still has to answer to the same statutes as a widow or a marshal. That is the beauty of a just system. It provides a level playing field where the quality of your argument matters more than the weight of your purse. We have to trust in the principle of fairness, even when the players are corrupt. I took a deep breath. The shame didn't go away, but it stopped being the only thing I felt. I felt a spark of something else. Resolve. Get your hat, I said. We re-going to town. We rode in together, side by side. The town was already buzzing. A crowd had gathered near the mercantile. Cyrus Vance was there. He was standing on a crate, talking to a group of ranchers. He was wearing a white hat and a black coat. He looked like a preacher, but he was preaching the gospel of greed. Beside him was Sheriff Miller from Otero County. Miller was a big man with a loud voice and a small mind. He saw us coming, and he grinned. Well, if it ain't the happy couple, Miller shouted. The crowd laughed. It was a jagged, ugly sound. I stopped my horse. I didn't get down. I looked at the crowd. I saw Jesse in the back. He looked pale. He looked like he wanted to disappear. Vance stepped down from his crate. He walked toward us, hands in his pockets. Elias, I imagine Mrs. Thorne has shared some interesting reading material with you this morning. About James, about his business dealings. I looked at Vance. I didn't let my face change. Dignity is a choice a man makes every morning when he puts on his boots. No one can take it from you unless you give them permission. People will try to humiliate you to make themselves feel large, but their cruelty is just a reflection of their own insecurity. If you remain steady, their arrows will eventually run out. That is how you win, by outlasting the hate. The past is the past, Vance, I said. My voice was steady. It carried. I am here to talk about the water, and about the injunction filed 2 hours ago with the territorial circuit. The crowd went quiet. Vance's smile faltered. Just for a second. What injunction? He asked. Clara stepped forward. She was holding a blue folder. She didn't look like a widow anymore. She looked like an officer of the court. Justice is a process, not an event. It requires patience and a deep understanding of the mechanics of the system. A person who knows how to navigate the law can stop a locomotive with a single piece of paper. That is the power of the written word. It survives, long after the shouting has stopped. The Sterling Thorn injunction, Clara said. Her voice was clear and cold, based on the Riparian Acts of 1877. You can build your railroad, Mr. Vance, but you cannot divert the spring. And if you cannot divert the spring, your steam engines cannot run through this pass. We are prepared to tie this up in court for the next 10 years. How much is your time worth? Vance looked at the folder. He looked at Sheriff Miller. Miller looked confused. The ranchers in the crowd started to whisper. They knew about the water. They knew that if the spring was diverted, their cattle would die. You be bluffing, Vance said. I don't bluff, Clara said. I document. Honesty in communication is the foundation of trust. If you say you will do something, you must be prepared to follow through. A person who uses empty threats is a person who has no real power. We aren't threatening you, Mr. Vance. We are informing you of the reality of your situation. Vance turned and walked back to his wagon. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at Miller. He just climbed up and sat there. He looked at us for a long time. Then he snapped the reins and drove away. The crowd started to break up. People were looking at us differently. They weren't whispering about the marriage anymore. They were whispering about the water. Jesse came up to my horse. He reached out and patted the animal's neck. You really did it, he said. He looked at Clara. You really stopped him. We delayed him, Jesse, Clara said. There's a difference. Success is a series of small victories, not a final destination. We won a battle today, but the war is still going on. We have to remain vigilant, and we have to keep working. A person who celebrates too early is a person who gets surprised by the next challenge. We have to be ready. We rode back to the house. The sun was starting to set. The sky was a bruised gold. We put the horses away and walked into the kitchen. The papers were still on the table. I looked at Clara. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't the leaden weight of shame. It was something lighter, something that felt like respect. What you gave me today, I said, shocked the town. But it shocked me more. She looked up at me. What did I give you, Elias? The truth, I said. The truth is the most valuable gift one person can give to another, even when it hurts. It's a sign of respect. It means you believe the other person is strong enough to handle reality. By telling me about James, you gave me my life back. You took away the ghost I was chasing and gave me a chance to stand on my own 2 feet. That is what a real partner does. They help you see clearly, even when the light is blinding. Clara didn't say anything for a long time. She just looked at the papers. Then she reached out and took my hand. She didn't pull it away. You re a good man, Elias Thorne, she said. You just needed a better map. I have one now, I said. We sat there in the quiet house as the darkness settled in. We weren't a marshal and a goafu anymore. We weren't two people caught in a legal trap. We were two people who had decided to tell the truth. And in Redbone Creek, in 1878, that was the most dangerous and the most beautiful thing a person could do. Hope is not a feeling. It is a discipline. It's the act of looking at a difficult situation and deciding that there is a way through. It requires work, and it requires honesty, and it requires the courage to stand by the people you trust. Tonight, we have hope, and that is a powerful thing to carry into the morning. I went to the parlor and laid down on the sofa. The wood was still hard, the air was still cold, but the stone in my pocket was gone. I closed my eyes and listened to the rhythmic sound of the wind. Tomorrow would bring more fights. Tomorrow would bring more Vance. But tonight, I was a man who knew the truth. And the truth, as it turns out, was the only badge I ever really needed. The final lesson of the night is this. You cannot change the past, but you can change the way you live in the present. James made his choices, and I made mine. But today, Clara and I made a choice together, and that choice is the beginning of a new story. A story worth telling, a story worth living. I drifted off to sleep, the light of the stars shining through the window, like a promise that the truth would always find a way. And for the first time in 8 years, I didn't dream of ghosts. I dreamed of the morning. The desert at night is a different kind of quiet. It is the absence of sound. It is the presence of a deep, heavy breathing. You can hear the earth cooling down. You can hear the sagebrush shivering in the wind. I sat on the porch of the house James built, my boots resting on the railing. I wasn't wearing my badge. It felt too heavy for a Tuesday night. I was looking at the moon. It was a sliver of silver, sharp enough to cut the sky. For 8 years, I had looked at that same moon and thought about justice. I had thought about reclaiming what was stolen. But Clara's papers had changed the flavor of the air. James hadn't been robbed. He'd been reckless. He had sold the ground beneath my feet while I was away playing lawman. The hardest truth a man has to face isn't the one about his enemies. It is the one about the people he loved. We build altars to our family, but sometimes those altars are just hiding places for the truth. The lesson I'm learning tonight, Clara, is that blind loyalty is a dangerous thing. It makes you fight wars that were already lost before you even drew your gun. A man has to be loyal to the truth first, or he's just a fool in a fancy vest. I didn't realize. I just said it out loud until the screen door creaked. Clara stepped out. She was wrapped in a heavy wool shawl. She didn't sit in the chair next to me. She stood at the railing, looking out at the shadows. "The truth doesn't make you a fool, Elias," she said. Her voice was soft, but it had that Philadelphia steel in it. "It just makes you a man with a clean slate." Most people go to their graves clutching a lie because they are too scared to see what S underneath. You have the courage to look. That S, why the town is scared of you. They aren't scared of your gun. They scared because you a man who can change his mind when the facts change. I looked at my hands. They were calloused, scarred. I spent 8 years hating a town for a crime they didn't commit. How do you fix that? Repentance isn't just saying you're sorry. It is changing the way you walk. That is the true value of an apology. It isn't for the past. It is for the future. You can go back and unhate them, Elias, but you can start protecting them for the right reasons. That is a lesson in character. It's about realizing that your mistakes don't have to be your ending. They can just be the place where you started getting it right. She sat down then. Not too close, but close enough that I could smell the lavender and the cold night air on her skin. We sat in silence for a long time. In Redbone Creek, silence is a conversation. It's how you measure the person sitting next to you. "Tell me about your first marriage," I said. It was a question I'd wanted to ask since the judge's office. Clara leaned back. Her head touched the wood of the house. It wasn't a marriage. It was a transaction. Harlan Cross was a man who liked to own beautiful things. My father was a man who had more debts than sense. Harlan offered to pay the debts and keep Jesse in school if I moved west with him. So I moved. The lesson I learned then was that a person's worth shouldn't be a bargaining chip. We talk about freedom in this country, but true freedom is the right to say no without starving. When we take away a person's choices, we are stealing their humanity. I didn't love Harlan. I respected the deal. But a deal isn't a life. "Is that why you here?" I asked. "To finish the deal." "I'm here because I am tired of deals, Elias. I'm here because Jesse is the only thing I have left that feels like home. And I'm here because I think you the first man I've met who actually cares about the rules more than he cares about his own reflection." I felt a strange tightness in my chest. It wasn't the badge. It wasn't the law. It was the realization that she saw me. Not the scary cowboy. Just me. Respect is a quiet fire. It doesn't blaze like passion, but it keeps you warm a lot longer. What we have to understand, Clara, is that a partnership built on honesty is stronger than one built on romance. Passion is a storm that blows over. Respect is the foundation that stays after the roof is gone. That is the most important lesson a man and a woman can learn. Look for someone who sees your soul, not just your utility. I stood up. I went inside and brought out the bottle of rye and 2 tin cups. I poured a little in each. I handed one to her. She took it without hesitation. We toasted the moon. "Vance will be back tomorrow," I said. "He's a man who doesn't like to lose." "He hasn't lost yet," Clara reminded me. "He has the railroad's money. He has the lawyers in Santa Fe. He is going to try to prove that James's sale of the mineral rights gives the railroad the right to take the surface land." "But they can't," I said. "Not if the water is protected." "That is the fight," she agreed. "But there is more to it, Elias. I found something else in the papers. James didn't just sell the mineral rights. He took a loan from Cyrus Vance personally, a private loan, and he used this house as collateral." I gripped my cup until the tin groaned. "So Vance owns the house?" "Not yet. The loan was never recorded at the county level. It was a handshake deal with a promissory note. In the eyes of the law, it is a civil matter, not a real estate lien. But Vance will use it to shame you. He'd tell the town you living in a house he paid for." I felt the anger rising. The old Elias would have ridden into town and pulled Vance out of bed by his hair. But I looked at Clara. She was calm. She was waiting for me to catch up. Anger is a tool that only works if you re the one holding the handle. If you let it hold you, you re just a weapon in someone else's hand. The lesson here, Elias, is that pride is a luxury we can't afford right now. Let him say what he wants about the house. A house is just wood and nails. A home is the people inside it and the truth they tell each other. We have to keep our eyes on the water, because water is life and wood is just kindling. I took a swallow of the rye. It burned, but it felt clean. "You rewrite. Let him talk. Lived in the dust before. I can do it again." "You won't have to," Clara said. She stood up and smoothed her shawl. "I have a plan for the hearing. But I need you to do something. For me, Elias. I need you to go talk to the ranchers. Not as a marshal, not as the man who's angry about his brother. Talk to them as a neighbor. Tell them the truth about the water. I shook my head. They won't listen to me. I've been the scary cowboy too long. Then stop being him, she said. A man's reputation is a garment he chooses to wear every day. If the one you have is too tight, take it off. That is the beauty of being a human being. We have the right to reinvent ourselves. You aren't your past, Elias. You are the choices you make tonight. That is the ultimate lesson in freedom. You aren't a prisoner of who you used to be. She walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the frame. And Elias? Yeah? Thank you for the rye. And for listening. Most men just wait for their turn to talk. You actually hear what I'm saying. She went inside. The screen door clicked shut. A rhythmic, final sound. I sat back down. I looked at the moon again. It didn't look like a blade anymore. It just looked like a light in the dark. I thought about what she said. Reinventing myself. It felt harder than breaking a wild stallion. But I realized she was right. I had been living in James's shadow for so long I didn't know what my own light looked like. Identity is a heavy thing to carry when it isn't yours. We spend so much time trying to live up to the expectations of the dead that we forget we re the ones who are still breathing. The lesson I am taking to bed tonight is that I don't owe James my life. I owe myself the truth, and I owe this town a marshal who knows the difference between a grudge and a duty. I finished my drink. I went inside. I passed the parlor where I usually slept, but I stopped at the door to the bedroom. Not to go in, just to stand there. Clara, I whispered. Yes, Elias. Her voice came through the wood. She was still awake. I'll talk to the ranchers tomorrow. Every one of them. Good, she said. I went to my sofa. I pulled the blanket up to my chin. The wood was hard, but my mind was quiet. For 8 years, I had been a man with a mission, but it was a mission of ghosts. Tonight, I was a man with a purpose. It was a purpose of water and dust, and a gray-eyed woman who knew how to read the law. Purpose is the only thing that makes the struggle worth it. Without it, you're just a cog in a machine you didn't build. But with it, every step has weight. Every word has power. That is the final lesson of the day. Find something worth standing for, and the standing gets a lot easier. I fell asleep to the sound of the wind. It wasn't whispering secrets about the past anymore. It was just blowing toward the morning. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to meet it. The next morning, I was up before the sun struck. I didn't wait for Clara to make the coffee. I made it myself. I sat at the table and looked at the maps. I didn't see a battlefield anymore. I saw a community. Jesse came in around 6. He looked at me, then at the coffee pot. He looked at the maps. You re-up early. Marshall? He said, I've got a lot of riding to do, Jesse, I said. I'm going out to the Miller Ranch. Then, the Omoche, placed in the Bar X. Jesse sat down. To talk about the eviction? No, I said. To talk about the truth. Jesse, the most important lesson a man in office can learn is that he's only as strong as his neighbors. I've been acting like I was an island, but a man alone is just a target. A man with his community is a fortress. I'm going to tell them about Vance S. Dam, and I'm going to tell them that their marshal is standing with them. Jesse smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen on him in weeks. I'll go with you. No, I said. I need you to stay here. Protect Clara. Vance is going to be angry when he finds out what I'm doing. He might try something desperate. Jesse nodded. He straightened his badge. Nobody gets past me, Elias. You have my word. Trust is the glue of a team. You can't do everything yourself, and you shouldn't try. A leader's job is to put the right people in the right places and then trust them to do their jobs. That is a lesson in management, but it is also a lesson in humility. I can't be everywhere, but I can trust Jesse, and I can trust Clara. I rode out of the yard as the sun started to peek over the mountains. The air was cold and sharp. I felt alive. I felt clear. I spent the whole day in the saddle. I talked to Miller. I talked to O'Shea. I even talked to the men I'd arrested in the past. I didn't use the badge as a threat. I used the truth as a bridge. Vance wants the water, I told them. If he gets it, your cattle die. Your land becomes dust. He doesn't care about Redbone Creek. He cares about the railroad's bottom line. They listened. They didn't all agree right away. Some were still wary of the scary cowboy. But they saw something different in my eyes. They saw a man who was fighting for them, not just for himself. Communication is about more than just words. It's about the intent behind them. People can feel when you being honest, and they can feel when you trying to use them. The lesson I learned today is that if you treat people with respect, they usually give it back. It might take time. It might take a lot of riding. But the truth is a hard thing to ignore once it's out in the open. By the time I headed back to the house, I had a dozen men promise to show up at the hearing in town, not with guns, with their presence, with their voices. As I rode up the trail, I saw the house. It looked solid in the twilight. It looked like a place that belonged. I saw Clara on the porch. She was waiting. I didn't have to say a word. She saw it in the way I rode. I dismounted and walked up the steps. I was tired. I was dusty. But I was happy. They coming, I said. Clara nodded. Then we ready. Preparation is half the battle, but conviction is the other half. You can have all the papers in the world, but if you don't believe in what you're redoing, you'll fail. Tonight, we have both. We have the law, and we have the truth. And more importantly, we have each other. That is the greatest lesson of all. You don't have to fight the world alone. We went inside. The house was warm. The coffee was fresh. And for the first time in Redbone Creek, the future didn't look like a threat. It looked like an opportunity. I sat at the table and looked at Clara. What's the first thing we do tomorrow? We stand tall, she said, and I knew we would. The dust in the street didn't just sit there. It hovered. It was thick enough to taste. It tasted like old copper and dry bone. I sat in my office, watching the shadows grow long across the floorboards. The hearing was tomorrow. Everything we'd built, every lie, every truth, every mile I'd ridden, was coming to a head. Jesse was sitting across from me. He was cleaning his boots. He was doing it with a ferocity that told me his mind wasn't anywhere but on the leather. He was thinking about Santa Fe. He was thinking about the men who were coming for him. Guilt is a shadow that grows longer the more you try to run toward the sun's. You can outpace it, and you can hide from it. The only way to get rid of a shadow is to step into the light. That is the lesson of a clear conscience, Jesse. It isn't about never making a mistake. It's just about being man enough to stand still and let the light hit you. If you keep running, you're just going to trip in the dark. Jesse stopped scrubbing. He looked up at me. His eyes were tired. They're coming tomorrow, Elias. Not just Vance. The men they won't care about a water injunction. They want their money. Or they want me. They'll have to go through a U.S. Marshal to get either. I said I meant it. The door swung open. It didn't creak. It slammed. Cyrus Vance walked in. He wasn't smiling today. He looked like a man who had realized the water was deeper than he thought. Behind him was a man I didn't know. Tall, thin, wearing a suit that looked like it had been pressed by a machine. He had a face like a hatchet. Marshal, Vance said. He didn't take off his hat. This is Mr. Kessler. He represents the bank in Santa Fe, the one that holds the promissory note on your brother S. house. I didn't get up. I just leaned back in my chair. Intimidation is the last resort of a man who has lost the argument. When you can win with facts, you try to win with fear. But fear only works on people who have something to hide. Once you've been told the truth, there isn't much left for a man like Vance to grip onto. That is the power of honesty. It leaves your enemy with nothing to pull. I know about the note, Vance, I said. Clara found it. Kessler stepped forward. He placed a piece of paper on my desk. It was yellowed, brittle. It looked like a death warrant. The interest hasn't been paid in 3 years, Marshal Thorne. Under the laws of this territory, the bank has the right to immediate foreclosure. We don't need a hearing for this. We just need the keys. I looked at the paper. James's signature was there. It was shaky. The signature of a man who knew he was drowning. The house is part of a marital estate now, I said. By law, it's protected until the hearing is settled. Not this note, Kessler said. His voice was like a dry reed snapping. This was a personal loan secured by the physical structure, not the land. We are here to take the house, Elias. We'll tear it down for the lumber if we have to. Just to make the point. I felt the anger bubbling up. It was hot. It was heavy. I wanted to reach across the desk and show Mr. Kessler what a personal loan felt like when it hit your jaw. But I looked at Jesse. He was watching me. He was waiting to see if I was the man I told him to be. Self-control is the difference between a leader and a brawler. If you react with your fists, you've admitted that your brain has run out of ideas. The lesson of the moment is that the enemy wants you to get violent. They want you to break the law so they can use the law to break you. You have to stay calm to stay in control. If you lose your head, you've already lost the fight. I stood up. Slowly, I didn't touch my gun. The house is wood. And nails, Kessler. You want the lumber? You come back after the hearing tomorrow. But right now, you're re-interfering with a federal officer's duties. Get out of my office. Vance stepped closer. He smelled like expensive tobacco and arrogance. Tomorrow at noon, Elias, we going to show the town that their marshal is a squatter in a house he doesn't own. We going to show them that his wife is just a clerk who knows how to twist the rules. By the time I am done, you won't be able to get a job sweeping the floors in this town. They walked out. The silence they left behind was thick. Jesse looked at me. They're going to take the house, Elias, he whispered. Everything Clara worked for, everything James built. It's just a house, Jesse, I said. But it hurt. It hurt because I knew what it would do to Clara. I rode home as the sun was sinking. The sky was a bruised purple, the color of a fresh wound. When I got to the ranch, Clara was in the garden. She was pulling weeds. She was doing it with a steady, rhythmic motion. Pull, toss, pull, toss. I sat on the porch. I told her about Kessler. I told her about the foreclosure. She didn't stop weeding. She didn't cry. She just kept moving. Resilience isn't about not feeling the blow. It is about not letting the blow stop your work. Most people think a crisis is a reason to quit, but a crisis is actually a reason to sharpen your focus. That is the lesson of the desert. The things that survive here are the ones that know how to hold on to their core when the outside is burning. We are going to hold on to our core. She stood up. She wiped her hands on her apron. She looked at the house. Let them have the lumber, Elias. We aren't the wood. We aren't the nails. We are the truth we stand on. Vance is going to try to shame you tomorrow, I said. She walked up the steps and sat next to me. She took my hand. Her skin was rough from the garden, but her grip was like iron. Shame is a weapon that only works if you agree to carry it. If you refuse to be ashamed, the weapon has no power. The lesson of dignity is that it is a private possession. No one can take it from you, and no one can give it to you. It is something you decide for yourself. Vance can shout from the rooftops, but as long as I know I've done right, his words are just noise. We sat there for a long time. The stars came out. They were bright, constant. They didn't care about foreclosures or railroad tycoons. I have something to tell you, Clara said. Her voice was small. About Jesse, and why the debt is so high. You don't have to, I said. I do. Honesty is the only way to build a real bridge between two people. If I keep a secret from you, I am building a wall, even if I think I am protecting you. The lesson of a partnership is that you have to share the weight of the truth, even when the truth is ugly. If I don't tell you, I'm not respecting you as my husband. She told me then. Jesse hadn't just gambled. He had tried to buy Clara's freedom from Harlan Cross years ago. He had borrowed money from the wrong people to try and pay off her contract. He had failed, and the debt had followed him. I looked at the darkness. Jesse had been trying to save her, just like I was trying to save her, just like she was trying to save us. He was trying to be a man, I said. He was trying to be a hero, Clara corrected. And he didn't realize that heroes usually end up making things worse for the people they love. The most important lesson a man can learn is that protection doesn't mean doing everything yourself. It means being honest enough to let others stand with you. Jesse tried to carry the world on his shoulders, and it crushed him. We have to teach him how to share the load. I stood up. I felt a strange sense of peace. The house was going. The town was turning. But for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I was. I wasn't James' brother. I wasn't the town's boogeyman. I was Clara Sterling's husband, and that was enough. The morning of the hearing was silent. No wind, no birds, even the dust seemed to be waiting. I was at the table, checking my sidearm, not because I expected to use it, but because the weight of it was familiar. It reminded me that I still had a job to do. A wagon pulled into the yard. It wasn't Vance. It was a small, dusty rig. My mother, Martha Thorne, was sitting on the bench. She looked older than she had a week ago. She looked like she was carrying a mountain. I went out to meet her. I helped her down. Her hands were trembling. Elias, she said. She looked at Clara, who had come out onto the porch. She looked at the house. I can't let you do this. I can't let you go into that town and fight for a lie. I led her into the kitchen. We sat at the table. Clara made tea. The sound of the spoon against the cup was rhythmic. Clink, clink, clink. Secrets are like poison in a well. You think you keeping the water safe by hiding the truth at the bottom, but eventually, everyone who drinks from it gets sick. The lesson of family history is that you have to clear out the poison if you want to survive. My mother has been drinking that water for 8 years, and it's time to stop. Mother, I said, I know about James. I know he sold the mineral. I know he's mineral rights. I know he took the loan. Martha looked at her tea. She didn't look surprised. She just looked tired. There. S. More, Elias. James didn't just sell out because of money. He sold out because he was angry at you. I felt a cold prickle on my neck. Angry? Why? Because you left, she said. Her voice was thin. You went to be a marshal. You went to find justice in other towns while our ranch was struggling. James felt like you'd abandoned the family. He sold the rights to show you that the land didn't matter if you weren't here to walk it. He wanted to hurt you, Elias. And he did. She reached into her bodice and pulled out a letter. It was folded, small. It was addressed to me, but it had never been mailed. Betrayal is often just a cry for help that no one heard. When people feel ignored, they do things to force you to notice them, even if those things are destructive. The lesson of brotherhood is that you have to be present to be a protector. James was wrong to do what he did, but he was doing it out of a loneliness I never acknowledged. I have to own my part in that silence. I took the letter. I didn't read it yet. I looked at Clara. She was watching me with a look of profound empathy. She knew what it was like to carry the weight of a brother's choices. "Why tell me now, Mother?" I asked. "Because Vance came to see me," Martha whispered. "He told me that if I didn't get you to drop the injunction, he'd depublish this letter. He'd show the town that James hated you. He'd break your heart in public. Elias, I couldn't let him do that. I'd rather tell you myself." I looked at the letter. I looked at the house. I looked at the woman I'd married to save a memory. "Vance is a vulture," I said. "He picks at the dead to get to the living." Clara stepped forward. She placed a hand on my mother's shoulder. "Manipulation is the art of using a person's love against them. Vance thought he could use your love for Elias to make him surrender. But what he doesn't understand is that love, when it is combined with the truth, is the strongest armor there is. The lesson of this moment is that Vance has run out of legal options. He's down to dirty tricks, and that means he's scared. "Are you going to town, Elias?" Martha asked. She was crying now. "I am," I said. "But not for the reasons I thought. I'm not going for James. I'm going for Redbone Creek, and I'm going for Clara." I stood up. I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in a decade. The ghosts were gone. James wasn't a victim. He was a man who made a choice, and I was a man making a choice now. "Jesse," I called out. Jesse came in from the porch. He looked determined. "You ride with my mother back to her place," I said. "Keep your eyes open. Vance might have men on the road." "I want to be at the hearing," Jesse said. "You've done enough, Jesse," I said. I looked him in the eye. "The greatest service you can provide right now is to protect the vulnerable. That is what a real lawman does. It isn't about being in the center of the action. It is about doing the job that needs doing, even if no one is watching. The lesson of duty is that it isn't always glamorous. Sometimes it's just making sure an old woman gets home safe." Jesse nodded. He understood. He helped Martha to the wagon. Clara and I were left alone in the house. We stood in the kitchen. The morning light was pouring in. It felt clean. "You okay?" she asked. "I am," I said. I looked at her. "The truth doesn't always feel good, Clara. Sometimes it feels like a wound. But a wound can heal. A lie is just a rot that stays hidden until everything falls apart. The lesson I am taking into that courthouse is that I don't need James's legacy to be a good man. I just need to stand for what is right today." We saddled our horses. We rode into Redbone Creek. The town was crowded. It felt like a hanging day. People were lined up on the boardwalks. They were whispering. Cyrus Vance was standing in front of the courthouse. He had a smug look on his face. He saw us and his eyes glinted. He looked at me, then at Clara. He was waiting for the surrender. I dismounted. I walked up to him. I didn't draw my gun. I didn't shout. "Vance," I said. "Marshal, I assume your mother gave you the news. Are we ready to sign the papers and go home?" I looked at the crowd. I saw the ranchers I'd talked to. Miller O'Shea, they were watching. They were waiting to see if their marshal was going to fold. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the realization that something else is more important than fear. Vance thinks my reputation is more important than the truth. He thinks I'm afraid of what people will say. But the lesson of this town is that people will always talk. What matters is what you can live with when you re-alone in the dark. I can live with the truth. "I'm not signing anything, Vance," I said. My voice was loud. It carried to the back of the crowd. "You want to publish letters?" Publish them. You want to tell the town my brother made mistakes? Tell them. But you aren't taking the water. And you aren't taking this town. We be going inside. The smug look vanished from Vance's face. He looked like he'd been slapped. He looked at the ranchers, who were now nodding. He looked at Clara, who was standing tall next to me. You'll be ruined, Elias, he hissed. I've been in the dirt before, Vance, I said. I know the way out. Do you? We walked past him and into the courthouse. The sound of our boots on the wood was rhythmic. Thud, thud, thud. It was the sound of a new story beginning. The final lesson of the morning is this. You cannot control what people think of you. You can only control who you are. If you live your life trying to manage your image, you read just a slave to other people's opinions. But if you live your life standing for the truth, you are the master of your own soul. And that is a power that Cyrus Vance will never understand. We entered the courtroom. The judge was waiting. The room was packed. I sat at the table and placed my hat on the wood. I looked at Clara. She smiled. The scary cowboy was gone. The man who lived for ghosts was gone. I was Elias Thorne, and I was ready to fight. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale sweat. It was a smell I knew well. It was the smell of trying to settle, with words, what they usually settled, with lead. Judge Miller sat up there like a stone carving. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Vance. He just looked at the clock. I sat next to Clara. She had her hands folded on the table. She looked like a queen waiting for a report from the front lines. Vance was across the aisle. He had his lawyers. He had his pressed suit. He had the look of a man who owned the air we were breathing. The law is a theater, Elias. Everyone has a role to play. But the thing about theater is that it only works if people believe the costumes. Once you see the man behind the curtain, the play is over. That is the lesson of the courtroom. Don't get distracted by the fancy talk. Stay focused on the truth, because the truth doesn't need a costume. It just needs a witness. Vance's lawyer stood up first. He talked about progress. He talked about the manifest destiny of the railroad. Then he turned his eyes toward me. Your Honor, the lawyer said, his voice dripping with false concern. We have evidence that the current occupant of the land, Marshal Thorne, is not acting out of a sense of duty. He is acting out of a personal obsession with a brother who, by all accounts, was a swindler and a debtor. We have a letter here. A letter from the late James Thorne. A murmur went through the room. The ranchers in the back shifted in their seats. Vance looked at me. He was waiting for me to break. He was waiting for the scary cowboy to reach for his gun and prove him right. I didn't move. I looked at the judge. Let him read it, I said. My voice was quiet. It cut through the room like a sharp knife through soft pine. The lawyer read the letter. He read about James's anger. He read about how James sold the land just to spite me for leaving. It was ugly. It was the sound of a family falling apart in front of 400 people. When he finished, the room was so quiet you could hear a fly buzzing against the window. Public shame is a fire that only burns you if you give it fuel. If you stand there and let the flames lick at you without flinching, eventually the fire runs out of wood. The lesson I've learned today, Elias, is that people can hurt you with your past if you've already made peace with it. James was a man who hurt. I was a man who wasn't there. That's a fact. It ain't a crime. And it sure as hell ain't the railroad-esque business. Clara stood up then. She didn't look at Vance. She looked at the judge. The letter is a tragedy, Your Honor, Clara said. Her voice was rhythmic, steady. But a man's anger does not negate the law. The Riparian Acts of 1877 are clear. The water rights of Redbone Creek belong to the inhabitants of the land, not to the corporations who hold the mineral rights. Mr. Vance can own the silver under the dirt, but he cannot own the lifeblood above it. To allow him to dam that spring is to allow him to kill every ranch represented in this room. Judge Miller looked at the ranchers. He saw Miller and O'Shea. He saw the men who paid the taxes that kept the courthouse roof from leaking. "The railroad brings money, Mrs. Thorne," the judge said. "Money is a guest," Clara replied. "Water is a neighbor. Money comes and goes with the market, but water is what allows a man to stay. That is the fundamental lesson of the West. Wealth is a number, but survival is a resource. If you give away the resource for a number, you'll end up with a pocket full of gold in a graveyard. A community that trades its future for a quick profit is a community that has forgotten how to live." Vance stood up. He forgot his lawyers. He forgot his manners. "I hold a note on that house. I hold a claim to the very structure they sleep in." I stood up then. I didn't rush. I walked to the front of the room. I took off my badge and laid it on the Judge S. bench. Not because I was quitting, but because I wanted them to see the man, not the tin. "Vance is right," I said to the crowd. "He holds a note. He can tear that house down tomorrow. He can take every board and every nail. He can leave me and my wife standing in the dirt." I turned and looked at Vance. Ownership is an illusion of the mind. You think because you have a piece of paper, you have power over me, but you don't. A man who has nothing to lose is the most powerful man in the world. The lesson of the day is this: you can take the house, but you can't take the spring. And if you can't take the spring, your railroad is just a very expensive pile of scrap iron. I'd rather stand in the dirt and be free than live in a mansion and be your servant. The ranchers stood up, one by one. Miller first. Then O'Shea. They didn't say anything. They just stood there. It was a wall of wool coats and sun-cracked faces. Judge Miller looked at the room. He looked at the law. Then he looked at Vance. "The injunction stands," the judge said. "The water rights remain with the land. And as for the house, Mr. Vance, you may pursue your civil claim for the lumber, but the spring stays open." Vance's face turned the color of a beet. He looked like he was about to have a stroke. He turned and walked out of the room. Kessler followed him. The sound of their boots was fast, frantic. The courtroom erupted, not with cheers, but with a deep, collective exhale. The town had been holding its breath for a long time. I walked back to Clara. She was pale, but her eyes were bright. "We did it," she whispered. "No," I said. "You did it. I just found the ranchers." Success is a shared burden. No one wins a war by themselves, even if they be the ones holding the flag. The lesson of a true partnership is that you play to each other's strengths. You had the mind for the papers, and I had the voice for the people. Together, we became something that Vance couldn't break. That is what a real marriage should be, a force that makes both people stronger than they were alone. We walked out of the courthouse. The sun was hot, too hot, but it felt good. Jesse was waiting by the horses. He saw the badge on the judge's bench through the window. "You left it in there," Jesse said. "I'll get it back tomorrow," I said. "Today, I'm just Elias." We rode home. The house was still there. It looked small. It looked fragile. But it was ours, for one more night at least. The next morning was the quietest I'd ever known. No Vance, no lawyers, just the sound of the wind in the grass. I spent the morning in the barn. I was fixing a harness. It was honest work. It didn't require an injunction or a badge. Clara came out around noon. She was wearing her traveling suit, the one she'd arrived in. My heart sank. I thought maybe the fight had been too much. Maybe she was ready for the city again. "The stage leaves at 4, she said. I put down the harness. I felt the old weight coming back. Freedom isn't just about escaping a cage. It's about having the right to choose where you stand. I lived my whole life thinking I had to be here because of a promise. But a promise made in the dark is a hard thing to keep in the light. The lesson I am learning now is that I can't ask you to stay just because the law says we remarried. That wouldn't be love. That would just be another kind of eviction." "I know," I said. "I'll drive you to the station." "Wait," she said. "I have something for you first." She handed me a folder. It was thick. I opened it. It wasn't an injunction. It was a deed. A new deed. "I went to the bank this morning," Clara said, "before the sun was up. I used my savings, the money I'd kept for my out. I paid off the note Vance held, not just the interest. The whole thing. The house is clear, Elias. It belongs to the land again." I looked at the paper, then I looked at her. "You spent your savings? Your freedom money?" Generosity isn't about giving what you can afford. It is about giving what the other person needs to be whole. The lesson of this gift, Elias, is that a home is more than a structure. It's a place where you don't have to be afraid of the past. I didn't want you living in a house that Vance could touch. I wanted you to have a place that was truly yours. That is what a partner does. They clear the path so you can walk it. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "Don't say anything yet," she said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out another paper, a smaller one. "I also went to see Judge Miller. This is a petition for annulment. It's already signed by him. It just needs your name." I looked at the paper. It was a way out. For both of us. The forced marriage could be gone by sunset. She could go to Philadelphia. I could stay here. "What he gave her shocked the town," I muttered. "What who gave who?" Clara asked. "Me," I said. I walked to the house. I came back with a small box. I'd hidden it in the parlor weeks ago. Inside was a key. Not to the house. To the office. And another paper. I had spent the night writing. I hadn't told her. The greatest gift you can give a person is their own autonomy. If you love someone, you have to give them the power to leave you. Otherwise, you read just a jailer with a better vocabulary. The lesson of this moment, Clara, is that I'm giving you exactly what you gave me. A choice. I handed her the paper. It was a full transfer of the Sterling land into her name alone, and a ticket for the train, not the stage, the train, to anywhere she wanted to go. "You have the land," I said. "You have the money from the ranchers. They pooled a fund to pay you for managing the water rights. You don't need me. You don't need a marshal. You are the most powerful person in this valley." We stood there in the dust, the scary cowboy, and the city widow. "So," Clara said. Her voice was trembling, just a little. "I have the deed. I have the money. I have the petition for annulment. I can go back to Philadelphia and never look at a cactus again." "You can," I said. My heart was breaking, but I stood tall. Love is not a contract. It is a decision that is made every single morning. If we stay together because of a legal trap, we are both dying slowly. But if we stay together because we want to see the sun rise over the same mountains, then we have something that no railroad can buy. That is the final lesson of this journey. The only thing worth having is the thing you are free to lose. Clara looked at the annulment papers. She looked at the train ticket. Then she did something that shocked me more than anything Vance had ever done. She tore them. She tore the annulment papers into a dozen pieces. She let them flutter away in the New Mexico wind. Then she tore the train ticket. "I've spent my whole life being told where to go." "Elias," she said. She stepped into my space. She put her hand on my chest, right where the badge used to be. By my father. By Harlan. By the law. Today, for the first time in 33 years, I'm the one making the choice. And what's the choice? I asked. I'm staying, she said, not because of the deed, not because of Jesse, but because I want to see what kind of man you become when you aren't chasing ghosts. And because I think the scary cowboy is actually a very good man who just needed someone to tell him the truth. I reached out and pulled her close. She didn't smell like lavender anymore. She smelled like sun and dust and life. I kissed her. It wasn't a forced kiss. It was the kiss of two people who had finally found home. Redemption is a long road, but it's a beautiful one when you have company. We spend our lives looking for justice, but what we really need is mercy, and mercy is what we found here in Redbone Creek. The lesson for the town and for us is that a life is built one truth at a time. If you keep building, eventually you have something that can withstand any storm. Jesse came out of the house. He saw us. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked relieved. "Does this mean I don't have to drive the wagon to the station?" he asked. "It means you can go start the coffee, Jesse," I said. "Your sister and I have work to do." We walked back into the house James built, but it didn't feel like James's house anymore. It felt like ours. The town of Redbone Creek would talk, of course. They'd talk about the marshal who married the widow. They'd talk about the railroad that had to go the long way around. They'd talk about what he gave her, the freedom that shocked them all. But we didn't care about the talk. We had the water, we had the land, and we had the morning. The final truth is this: you can T-force a flower to grow, and you can T-force a person to love you. All you can do is provide the right soil and wait for the rain. We provided the truth. We provided the respect. And today, the rain finally came. That is the end of the struggle and the beginning of the life. And that is exactly how it should be. The sun went down over the New Mexico mountains. It was purple. It was gold. It was beautiful. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't watching the clock. I was just watching the light. This channel brings you gripping Western cowboy stories, emotional frontier love, motherly devotion, kindness between strangers, compassion, justice, and stories that remind us what it means to remain human in a hard world. If you enjoyed this tale, please like, comment, share it with fellow Western story lovers, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories from the wild frontier. The story you are about to read is entirely fictional. While it may draw inspiration from universal human experiences, it does not depict real people or actual events. Any perceived parallels are coincidental and should not be interpreted as deliberate representations.
As the dust settles over Redbone Creek, this story leaves us with more than the echo of hoofbeats, court papers, and hard words spoken under a western sun. It reminds us that the greatest battles are not always fought with guns. Sometimes they are fought inside a man's own heart. Marshal Elias Thorne began as a man chained to grief, anger, and a version of the truth he had carried for 8 long years. He believed justice meant taking back what had been lost. But through Clara Sterling's courage, wisdom, and honesty, he learned that justice without truth is only another form of blindness. A badge, a reputation, or even a family name means very little if a person is not willing to face reality, admit mistakes, and protect what is right, instead of what is merely personal. The meaning of this story is found in the transformation of its people. Elias learns that strength is not measured by fear, violence, or control, but by humility, self-control, and the courage to change. Clara teaches us that knowledge can be more powerful than any weapon, and that a person who understands the truth cannot easily be ruled by greed or intimidation. Jesse's struggle shows us that shame can destroy a young man if he runs from it, but it can also become the beginning of maturity when he finally accepts responsibility. And Redbone Creek itself reminds us that a community survives not because one hero saves it, but because ordinary people decide to stand together. This story also carries a deep lesson about love and partnership. Love does not always arrive gently. Sometimes it begins in conflict, distrust, sacrifice, and necessity. But when two people learn to respect each other, tell each other the truth, and fight for something larger than themselves, a bond can grow stronger than romance alone. Elias and Clara's relationship shows that real partnership is not possession. It is not control. It is standing side by side, even when the road ahead is uncertain, because both hearts have chosen the same moral ground. Most of all, this tale reminds us that greed may be loud, powerful, and well-dressed, but it is never stronger than truth when good people refuse to bow. Cyrus Vance wanted land, water, profit, and power. But Elias and Clara fought for dignity, community, justice, and the future of people who could not defend themselves alone. That is the value this story gives us. Never let bitterness decide your path. Never let shame silence your truth. And never believe that one person's greed is greater than a community's courage. So when we walk away from Redbone Creek, we carry this lesson with us. The past may shape us, but it does not have to own us. A person can change. A wounded heart can heal. A mistake can become wisdom. And even in the harshest land, where dust covers every road and storms gather on the horizon, hope can still take root when people choose truth, compassion, and justice over fear.